Joining us, contributing writer at The Atlantic and Middle East historian Arash Azizi, and former commanding general of U.S. Army Europe and MS Now military analyst, retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. So, Arash, we have been here many times before. In fact, my notes tell me that this is the 39th time that Trump has signaled a peace deal is imminent. Why should we think anything's different this time around?
I think things are different. First of all, Iranians are also saying it, and they don't always say it. Abbas Araghchi, Iranian foreign minister, said that we're there. Secondly, I can, based on my sources, it does appear that there is a text, that there is agreement on it in Iran. National Security Council yesterday discussed it in Iran and was positive about it. It does seem to have the approval of the United States. Israel is even indicating basically that it's willing to go along with it. So while it's, it's not over until it's over, I think we're pretty close to what would be a phase one deal. And then there's, other things that will come up. But this will, we can say, ends the war, opens the Strait of Hormuz, gets us back to other negotiations about pending issues within the countries.
Those pending issues are a pretty big deal, though.
They really are.
Involving nuclear powers, for example.
That's right, yeah.
And there has been some reporting in Iranian state media. A lot of Americans would have many questions about trusting what's necessarily in Iranian state media. But that has suggested that the deal terms, at least where they've started right now, are pretty bad for the United States.
To be honest, there are good reasons not to trust those sort of readings of the deal, and I'll tell you two reasons. First of all, Araghchi, again, Iran's own foreign minister, came out and said, don't listen to the media speculation. Second of all, even though they're a state, as in they're part of the regime, Fars News, for example, is controlled really by a particular faction, a hardline faction in Iran, which is not necessarily representative of the regime leadership. So I would say that the version that came out by Fars News in particular, and Mehr later, are not quite indicative of where things are. I think the real deal is, look, it is true, Iranians could argue that they have better terms now that they would have gotten before the war. So in some ways, it's not great for the U.S., but it is an end to the war.
General, do you think that the Iranians have come out here with a little bit of an upper hand?
I definitely think they've come up with an upper hand, Antonia. We're also seeing the fact that it's a 60-day memorandum of understanding to talk about what they're going to talk about and how they're going to talk about it. This is not a peace deal. It is a cessation of hostilities while individuals can begin talking. And when you look at the details of the list, as you're showing right now, the ceasefire is number one. Both sides want that. The reopening of the straits, both sides want that. End of the naval blockade, Iran wants that more than we do, and the release of billions of dollars in sanctions relief, and that can go anywhere from about $20 billion to indicators that it could be over $300 billion, and that's significant. But you don't see anything on there about nuclear weapons and the thwarting of Iran's desire to either produce nuclear weapons or give up the capability of seeking that in the future. So there's going to be continued discussions over these next 60 days. And the thing I'd add to that is when we're talking about 60 days, that takes us through the end of August. That comes closer and closer to a U.S. election cycle and the impatience of President Trump. He wants something on this. And I think what we have, both sides going into this are not trusted by the other side. So you're going to see quite a few dynamics in any kind of negotiation, which we have over what comes next on the Memorandum of Understanding.
Arash, in the best case scenario here, if they do reach this understanding in the next few days, what kind of regime have the Iranians been left with? We've talked about this in the past. You have family there right now. And at least at the beginning, many Americans were under the impression that while, of course, uranium enrichment and nuclear power was a key part of this, if maybe the very first and most primary part of it, the other piece of it was freedom and justice for Iranian people.
I never thought this was really on the line, to be honest. You can't get freedom and justice via war. I never thought that would, result to that. And unfortunately, the regime remains a pretty brutal regime that has very little time for, Iranians' demands for justice or democracy. But we'll have to continue those fights on our own. Iranians, their democratic opposition, civil society in Iran will have to continue those fights. What we can be hopeful about is that if there are better ties between Iran and the United States, if these hostilities end, if there is more opening, if there's more economic uplifting in Iran, we'll have better grounds, I personally think, to continue those struggles. This idea that by military and economic pressure you somehow transform a dictatorship to a democracy, I always thought this was short-sighted. It has no real precedence. So I think, and a lot of my fellow Iranians did think that maybe that's how it will happen. I hope that they'll see clearer now that this is not a path where we get to our demands, not with war and not with sanctions.